Maybe it has something to do with the parsha.
Could be. Live with the times.
We're starting a new Chumash. Chumash Shmois. Shemois. Shmois. Ve'ele Shemot b'nei Yisrael abei Mitzrayim. Certainly the most important topic in our parsha is that Hashem suddenly hears the cry of Am Yisrael. After they've been in Egypt for some 210 years, probably a little bit less, he hears their cry, and he sends Moshe Rabbeinu to save them.
But he always hears everything, so what do you mean?
No, we talked about this before. We talked about it in Sdom. Remember that?
He
that
recognized the cry.
So we said that there's two different levels. Right, there's two different levels of involvement of Hashem engaging in the world, and we could go over that again. But here we have new things, and we talked last week about. I raised this theory that maybe in Torah, or he doesn't talk so much about Sovev and Memale, and here's a mimer where he does. And this mimer is from Tafkuf Samech Gimel. Where are my pages? What did I do with them?
By the way, talking about money, I have to tell you, the whole book was worth it for the story of Red Moti of Chernobyl and the money.
I told you that he has a lot of stories about money.
But that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
What's even more amazing is...
What, the Hanukkah story?
Yes.
So he has many like that.
But what's even more amazing is that it says where he's buried. And he's buried in Anna Chepka.
Oh, okay.
Which is the place where my son is living.
Really?
Yeah, it was destroyed and rebuilt. No, nobody knew it. It was destroyed and rebuilt, the whole town. And somebody found a plot of land and bought it and they started to build on it. And they discovered just outside the borders of where their building plot was, there's a grave. And the grave is Moti of Chernobyl. And the story of how he got there.
Oh, they found him. Moti of Chernobyl. So they know where the Tzion is now.
Yeah.
It wasn't known for a long, long time. When was it found?
I don't know. But they all go to it now.
So the minute you get your vaccination in 2 years...
No, I'm going to Chayil. I can't go to the graveyard. My son says that it's a place I can't go to. But he told me the story of how come he's buried there and not in Chernobyl, which is an amazing story, which you didn't put in your book.
No, we didn't know it. So
I'll tell you the story when we finish.
We'll need it for this year. When is Motka of Chernobyl? What date is this your side?
Somewhere here, I think.
Where? Sometime
Somewhere
in the summer.
In here.
In the summer. I remember it's in the summer. So we'll need the story for this year's installment, if you know. Navin inyan simchat chatan v'kala. So anyway, Hashem coming down is the topic here. And it's from a very different perspective than anything that we've seen so far. And he's going to explain it based on what he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, that it's not just that he's coming down to save them, he's going to take them to a land of milk and honey. And these two words, milk and honey, have a tremendous significance. What does it mean that in Eretz Yisrael, that in the land of Israel, God is appearing in a way of milk and honey?
Which is not really milk and it's not really honey anyway.
Well, it's also milk and honey in the physical sense, but that's not what is hiding behind these words.
Cow's milk, and it's not bees' honey.
Okay. So let's see. Lavin inyan simchat chatan v'kala. So this is related to understanding the joy of a wedding between a bride and her groom. Hinei perush chatan v'kala. And this is based on the verse that he promised Moshe Rabbeinu that he'd bring them to a land of flowing with milk and honey. Why are the bride and groom called chatan v'kala? Because the chatan, he means literally to come down, to descend. That's what it means in Hebrew. So obviously this is going to mean Hashem. And he says the etymology of this word groom in Hebrew, chatan, is from the Aramaic to come down, to descend. And the groom descends from above to below. Vechavat, vechot, like chet taf, it should be chet taf, without the vav in the middle, if I'm not mistaken. I think he corrected it in the new version that I have. No, he says chut. Chut hu ikara ikar teva. So the two letters chet taf, they're the main part of this root. So it means to descend. V'kala yesh ba shnei perushim. But now this is surprising, very surprising. He says kala means two things. The bride, the word in Hebrew for bride means two things. Ha'echad leshon kilion. The first is that she is annihilated. It means annihilation. Really, it means to yearn with such passion that it's as if you're annihilated, as if you're decimated, you disappear. K'mo shekatav kalta nafshi, like my soul yearns, as it says. Kalta nafshi, that's in Tehillim, right?
I don't know. Don't ask.
Kalta nafshi, in Tehillim Pei Dalet, in chapter 84. But the second is more surprising. Vashani leshon kele. And another meaning for bride is prison.
Oh.
This is really women's emancipation here, right?
She puts her husband in prison.
Oh, she puts her husband in prison. Okay. They used to say that the family means, mishpacha comes from shifcha, comes from maidservant.
Oh, yeah.
So when a woman wants to start a family, she's saying, she's either saying, I need a maidservant, or if there's not going to be a maidservant, she's going to be the maidservant. It's sort of like what it's saying.
So women would go crazy if they knew all this.
That's what it said. Obviously, he doesn't mean it in this way, and we'll see what he means, because he doesn't mean it literally. He means it in terms of the symbolism behind this.
Excuse me, can I borrow this?
Yeah. Prison prevents you from going out. Kmo, as we have a few verses in Tanakh that exemplify this. The first one is Sim ze beit hakele, or kadome laze, kol kalu b'bayit lo yitze. So these are the first one is a verse from Melachim, from Kings. Simu et ze beit hakele. In Divrei Hayamim, in Chronicles, it says Simu ze beit hakele, as it says, it's close to here. V'chadome ze kalu b'bayit lo yitze. That's from Tehillim, in 88. Kalu velo yitze. Did you remember that verse?
No.
Nobody remembers that verse. Okay? It's very.
Which capital is it?
88. Peichet, pasuk tet. Uveu kol ze. So to understand this etymology, why they ended up being called bride and groom, based on the one who descends and the one who's locked away. He can't come out. To understand this, we have to understand how it relates above. So the day of the wedding for God, as it were, is when he came down on Mount Sinai and he gave the Torah. The day of his wedding, as it says in Song of Songs in chapter 3, is talking, according to the sages, about the giving of the Torah. Dehainu. The Chassan, the groom, is the Almighty. And he is Sovev Kol Almin, Hanikra B'Shem Havaya. And he is the one who surrounds all worlds. We don't mean all of God. We mean the aspect of God that we call the one that surrounds all worlds. Right? The Sovev. V'chala is Kol Kal Hei. It's a very interesting way to say this. What he's saying is that the Hey has everything in it. Kol Hey, like the letter Hey of Avaya, the last letter has everything in it. What is that? Hu Shem Adni, Koach HaPoel B'Nifad. This is referring, the bride is referring to the name Adni, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, and it's referring to the power of the actor within the one acting, within the agent. And so
there's only two times where you say something is beautiful. Okay. What's the two times you say something is beautiful?
I don't understand. What do you mean? What are you referring to?
Shena Kala.
Yeah.
Shena Lavana.
Yeah.
Any color that you see is beautiful.
Okay.
So it comes to this called, hey, everything is there, right? So she has beauty.
Okay. So everything is there. All the powers are there. And that is enclothement. That's Pchinat Memale Kol Almin. That is the light that fills reality.
So she's filled with the light of Hashem. So she's
So again, taking it now to the people is going to miss the point, because we want to abstract it, right? We want to abstract it outside of the world of humanity. It's a great descent for the sovev, for the surrounding light, to come down into and to contract into the name Adni, into the Kala, into this Memale, into this light that fills the world, fills it with life.
1 second. Sovev or Mamale?
The sovev is the Chassan, and he's coming down into the Memale, into the Kala.
But isn't Mamale more of a Simpson for Hashem than Sovev? Sovev is still not connected, so therefore it's...
But Sovev is not contracted. But to come into the Memale, that's the contraction, that's the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum is to enter into this state of marriage with the Kala.
But every human being has Hashem inside as well as outside. Everybody has Tzimtzum, not just the Chochmah and Kala.
But here we're talking about Yom Chatunato is the day that he came down on Mount Sinai and he gave the Torah. So that was a tremendous Tzimtzum. What kind of a Tzimtzum? We've talked about this in the past. That the Tzimtzum of giving the Torah is different than the Tzimtzum of creating nature.
But Kodesh Baruch is a Kol Yachol, so what does it matter to him?
It matters to us. It's completely different for us. For him, everything can be done. The question is, from our perspective, what does each one represent? So creating nature is a tzimtzum, it's a contraction, but it's a contraction that hides, that conceals. Whereas creating the Torah, giving the Torah, is a contraction of what we call concentrating. It's not concealing, it's concentrating. It's bringing into every letter of the Torah the infinite. So the sovev, the infinite, has to enter into the finite. But in nature, there's no infinite inside everything. Nature is only concealing. It's only concealing the infinite. It doesn't contain it.
But the infinite is inside everything in the world.
Not the same thing. No. Not everything is infinite. This table is not, not infinite.
Hashem's in the table.
No, he's concealed by the table. It's a different, completely different relationship. That's why you don't bow down to the table. If he was in the table, there's some logic to bowing down to it.
We don't bow down to human beings, and Hashem's definitely inside every human being.
No, he's not definitely inside every human being. The natural part of the human being is only concealing Hashem. The neshama that you're saying, that's already something else. I don't know how to bow down to a neshama. I can't see it. But in the future, it says that there will be such a thing, that the body will no longer conceal, and you'll see the neshama.
But it also says that when Mashiach comes, we'll look at a flower and we'll see Hashem inside. So Hashem won't be concealed.
Not inside, but behind. It will stop concealing what there is. It will stop concealing the hashra, the fact that Hashem is everywhere. But that's not the same thing as enclosement. In the Torah, there's that the light entered and was concentrated inside the letters. That when you learn a letter of Torah, you encounter the infinite. You actually encounter it. When you're studying nature, you can't encounter the infinite. You can try to see past the appearances, and from that say something about the infinite. But you can't take you can't take a tree and encounter the infinite within it. It won't work. So, anyway.
That's why the worshipping tree worship was a big affair.
Right. But that's why they worshipped it, because they made that mistake. That's also why they worshipped people. Same thing. It's all a mistake. It's a categorical mistake of not understanding the difference between the two contractions.
Okay.
כי נכי דרגה להיות משפילי בשמיים וארץ, מאחר שההווי הוא עניין היה ובביאה, למעלה מזמן ומקום, אני ראשון, וכולו קמא כלא חשיב וכידוע. Because Havaya means he was, he is, and he will be. So he's above time. And we said time is the main thing that changes. And he's also above space even. Because he's first and he's last and he's everywhere.
Above space, but he's not constricted by space.
Okay.
It's the same thing?
He's not constricted by space. Leave it. It's better the way you said it. So mashpili b'shamayim va'aretz, so that Hashem is, as it were, that Havaya, the God's name Havaya, descends. It comes down. It lowers itself down to come into the heavens and the earth. Even the heavens and the earth, there's no difference. They're also limited relative to God's name. That is a tremendous descent. So that's why he's called the Chassan. What?
So what was happening to the world before Matan?
He said before Matan Torah, Elonim lo yerdu lemata, v'tachtonim lo yalu lemala. There was no ability to interact.
So what was happening?
There was a complete dissonance.
So what was keeping the world going?
Chesed, Hashem's rachamim. It said for 20 generations, he kept it going thanks to just his patience. Until the Torah was given. From the moment that Avram came about, he began to lower the Shekhinah down, to bring the Shekhinah back down, until in Matan Torah, in the 26th generation, it became a permanent descent into the Torah. Before then, there was no Torah. The holy texts, but they weren't Torah yet.
Then it went back up again.
Good, but since there's Torah, there's no lack of connection anymore.
There's no going back.
אומנם, כדי להבין למה נקרא ממלא כל עלמין בשם כלה, וכפירוש השני לשון כלא, וגם להבין כל עיקר שמחת חתן וכלה, יש להקדים להבין פירוש הפסוק, כמו הרע תקריב ללדת, תאכיל תזעק בחבליה, כן היינו מפניך הוויה. So, to understand why the memale, why the light that fills reality, why that is called a bride, that requires some explanation. And to understand that, and to understand the joy of the Chassan and Kala in their wedding, we have to understand the pasuk from Yeshaya, chapter 26. Like a woman who is near to giving birth, tachil tizak b'chavalea, she'll be ill and crying out from the contractions. Chavalea is like the contractions here. So we are before you, Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the way we feel towards you. So to understand this, so he's going to explain now this verse. The entire time that we were in Egypt, were called, or were described as being in a state of being the fetus inside the pregnant, inside the womb. We are the ones who are in the womb. And we were the ones in the womb. Not that we were going to give birth to something. We were what was going to be given birth to. And that's what this verse means when it says, like a woman who's close to giving birth. That we became sick from the pregnancy. And the birth, he says, is not the way that it's usually understood. Like it's the birth of the people. It's the birth of Mashiach. That's the birth that this verse in Isaiah is talking about. Because there's already a people, so we can't be talking about that. About the Mashiach, it says in the first chapter of Tehillim, second chapter, it used to be one chapter. In the second chapter of Tehillim, that today I gave birth to you, says Hashem, to Mashiach. And just as the woman cries out when she's giving birth, so will be the birth pains of Mashiach, which are like the birth pains of actually giving birth. Then Isaiah ends his metaphor by saying, so are we before you, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Havaya. So we're like that. Pirush. Liot ki kol ikar hakavana me'aseh mitzvot yichud kudsha brichu v'shchinte. Pirush kudsha brichu yadua shu shem Havaya. Sovev kol amin. The whole purpose of giving us mitzvos, of giving us commandments, was to connect kudsha brichu, the Almighty, the Holy Blessed One, with the Shekhinah, with the Divine Presence. And what it means by the Holy Blessed One, Kudsha Brichu Yadua Shu Shem Havaya, that refers to Yud Kei Vav Kei, because that's Za always, Zer Anpin. So that's Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that refers to Sovev Kol Anmin, that refers to the surrounding light, right? The Za is always the surrounding light. The Malchus is always the filling light. Right? That's we've talked a lot about that.
Zah?
Zeranpin, right? The small countenance. Which is like Tiferes. If you want to say it in Sfirot, it's Tiferes and Malchus. Kucha Brichu and Shchinte.
Where? Which world?
Doesn't matter, in any world that you are. And whatever level you're at, when you do the commandment, there you're creating that unification between Zeranpin and Malchus. And the overall effect of all these mitzvos, commandments, is that the sovev is revealed. Not just any sovev, the sovev of Atzilus. Meaning the world of Atzilus.
Someone who's doing a mitzvah and doesn't know what he's doing, and doesn't know why he's doing it.
It also affects. It also has an effect, all the time.
But which one is that?
What? Depends on where his mind is.
He's doing it.
He, from his point of view, it's either just an action, or he has some feeling, emotion involved, he even has some understanding. These are all call it the anchors in our reality, where he is. But by doing so, he's also affecting the world of Atzilus. He's also affecting the world of emanation. And we could say that he's also affecting from Hashem's perspective. Why? Because because he's doing it in the end as a mitzvah. This relates to the question of whether somebody who's doing the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, the Noachite laws, without admitting that this is a commandment from God. He just does it because it makes sense.
We said that don't count.
It's not that it doesn't count. It counts. It makes it a better world. The world's a better place when he does this. It certainly counts in terms of the atmosphere in the world. But it doesn't do. But it's not his role. It's not his. He's not performing his duty. And because he's not performing his duty, the effect on the higher world is non-existent. So there used to be, in the Rambam, he used to say that a person who does the 7 mitzvos, or he does whatever mitzvah he does, not because it's a commandment, because it makes sense to him, he's not from the righteous among the nations, and not even amongst their wise people. So the Rebbe jumped on this. Why? Because it was found in the Gniza, in the Cairo Gniza, that there's a different reading here. Instead of saying that he's not from their wise people, it says Ela michachmeim. The Vav was actually an Aleph. So we don't know which one is right. Both of them, everybody in the academic world right away jumped and said, of course, the Ela michachmeim makes more sense. Because he's a wise person, he understands the value. The Rebbe gave a long sikha that the fact that you find something in a Gniza doesn't prove anything. It proves that somebody thought that made more sense, and that somebody was.
It proves that maybe that it was written wrong, and so therefore they put it in the Gniza.
I think this was even found in the Cairo Gniza. They found one of the Rambam's actual. No, that I don't think we have, as far as I remember. What we have is copies of the Mishnah Torah that the Rambam did a proofreading of, and then he has corrections, okay? And on that manuscript there are corrections from the Rambam, and there he didn't correct. I think that's the big chap, that if it should have been velo michachmem, you would have corrected it to velo. I'm not sure. I have to check the scholarship on this. I don't remember what it is. But anyway, the Rebbe said it doesn't matter. The fact that Jews have for 1,000 years almost learned it, velo michachmei, you don't take it back. Because even if it was a mistake, everything in the Sefer Torah, everything in something that's been read by so many great scholars, so many chachamim of Torah, you can't unwind. You don't just take it back and say that we're all wrong. So this also has merit. So then he proceeded to explain what the merit of this variant of the text, saying velo michachmem, and not even amongst their wise people, what the merit of that is. And the bottom line according to here is that he doesn't affect chachma as an atzilus. He doesn't, because he's doing it not from being commandment, not as a duty. He's not affecting the world of atzilus. He's not causing.
He's doing it because of himself, or the biggest problem with doing it because of himself.
A chacham has bittul.
Changes.
That's the bottom line there. That's what the Psicha says. I'm saying it now in Kabbalistic language. He's not affecting the world of Atzilus. He's not affecting the world where God is completely transparent, where you see Him completely. that he can't affect. Why? Because he has no bittul. He's not doing it as a real wise person, because a wise person has to have nullification before God. And to have nullification means that you do it because it's your duty, not because it makes sense to you. That's the difference between understanding and wisdom. And that if you're a wise man, you have nullification, and if you're an understanding man, you have yeshus. You have a sense of self, because understanding has to make sense to you. Okay. ולזאת הכוונה אנו אומרים ברוך אתה השם. That's why in the bracha we say Baruch Ata Hashem. Every bracha, every blessing begins, blessed are you, Havaya, Hashem. Perush Baruch. Baruch means Leshon Hamshecha v'Itgalut milamala mata. We're taking something from above to below.
Why is Baruch?
Because we said Baruch means like a knee. And it's like taking a branch from a tree and pulling it down and covering it with earth, cutting it so that it grows new roots. And that's how you make vines spread. That's the way that a person who has vines makes more vines from them. דהיינו שיתגלה באלוקים דווקא בחינת הוויה. ברוך אתה השם אלוקינו.
Why did you see Eskalos?
You don't have that word?
Where's the...
where's the revelation?
Yeah.
We say Elokim. Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. Elokeinu Melech HaOlam is already the Isgalus, the king of the world.
Is Teva.
What?
Elokim.
No, you see nature. You see nature.
But you say the Shem is hidden in nature.
That's what we do when we say bracha. Here was an orange, and the orange until now was only concealing God. And by making the bracha, I imbue this as something that won't conceal God anymore. It will be revealed. The godliness will be revealed in this as I eat it. And the godliness that will be revealed is in Kabbalah will be like the sparks of holiness that my body will take out of this fruit. Vezeu kemashal aleida. And that's why all this is likened. This is the meaning of Isaiah using the metaphor of birth. That first the
Uba is it?
How do you say it in English? Like instead of fetus, there's also another word. Fetus is like when it's tiny. How do you say when it's
No, I think it stays fetus. No?
You keep calling it a fetus the whole way through? No.
I think so.
No, I don't think so. They have a different word. Yeah, in English, there's words for everything. I'm sure there's a word for the first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. So the child is hidden in his mother's womb, and at birth, and then he comes out. The same, we have this mashal many times, that the sun and its sheath are also the same way as like Havaya and Elokim. Havaya being what's concealed, and Elokim being what's concealing it. So Havaya is hidden and contracted in Elokim in a state of pregnancy, in a state of small-mindedness. Then here we have some kind of something that's seems to be missing, but what he means to say is Gadol. What does he want to say? He wants to say Gadol Havaya be'ir Elokeinu. That when he's revealed in the city of God, city of Elokim, that's when you see that God is great. Yeah. It's almost like saying that when you look at the child that came out of the mother, and you look at the mother, you say, how was all this concealed in there? Right. It doesn't make sense. You can't put it back.
Right. That's like Rabbi Yisroel says, how did the
but there he doesn't mean. But there he doesn't mean that. There he means that the infinite is within these words. It's a little bit different.
Okay, I have to disappear. I want to tell you the story about Mordechai tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'll tell you as we're going downstairs.
No, tell it to me now, because we have to have a document of it.
Okay. This is the story that my son told me. There is a place called Anatevka. Anatevka was supposed to be the place where Fidra on the roof took place. The original town of Anatevka, nobody knows where it was. Mm-hmm. There's a guy called...
Where in the Ukraine are we talking?
We're talking about 30 kilometers outside of Kiev.
In which direction? East, west, south?
I don't know.
Okay.
There's a guy called Reuven Assman who calls himself the chief rabbi of the Ukraine.
He is.
And he wanted to build something, so he searched around for a plot. And he found an empty plot of land, And he went to the Iriya and he asked to buy it, and it's in the Machoz, in the neighborhood called...
Oblosk.
Of Shemot Tefka or Zinga Tefka. I don't remember what it was, but it's an Tefka at the end.
Okay.
And he said, what's this plant? And they said, that's Anatefka. That's his name. Okay.
That's what it says in the record.
Yeah, so he bought the plot of land, basically. And it's still always, in Ukraine, everything is a bit...
Yeah.
And...
Money talks.
And he started to build. And when he started to
What did he build there?
He has a school.
Oh, that's where he put his school.
And that's where he put all the people from Donetsk. And it's not exactly... But that's where it is. That's the issue. It's about 35 to 40 minutes drive from the center of Kiev. I imagine it's in the direction of Mesibush. So
south.
Yeah. So they discovered, my son didn't exactly tell me how they discovered, but they discovered that immediately on the border of the land which they bought, there was some graves. And they discovered that one of the graves of...
Hebrew on it.
One of the graves was of Mordechai of Chernobyl.
They found the tombstone.
Yeah, and there were people who were already coming there.
People knew.
It wasn't a secret. They didn't discover it.
Oh.
But they discovered that it was there.
They didn't know.
They're Chabadnikim, so they didn't know about it.
Yeah, what did they know about Mordechai of Chernobyl?
And there was a little path, and people used to go there. So they wanted to know why.
By the way, the name of his book is the Kutei Torah. So
okay.
It's
they wanted to know why was
confusion.
he buried there and not in Chernobyl.
Yeah.
So my son tells me that the story goes like this: that in the town of Anatevka, there was a very, very beautiful, rich, young Jewish man. He was extremely handsome and very attractive, like Yosef. And the daughter of the Parids decided that she wanted him. She wanted him to be her husband, and she was, like Mrs. Pharaoh, she was yearning for him. So the Parids went to this man, and he said, no way, I'm Jewish.
It's a famous story, yeah. Go ahead.
So you know the story?
I think I heard it, yeah, but I didn't know he was involved.
So the guy said no. One day they kidnapped the guy, and they brought him down to a cellar where the daughter of the pirates was waiting for him, completely naked. And they expected that nature would take his course, and then so he refused to touch her, and she was so distraught from the fact that he would come near her that she dropped dead. So when the pirates came back after a couple of hours,
and he had killed her.
He said that he killed her. So they took him to the beautiful courts of the Catholics, and they tortured him. They tortured him till he made the mission, and then they tortured him to death. And then they apparently gave the body back to the Chevra Kedusha, and they buried him. So Mordechai of Chernobyl said that when my time comes, I don't want to be buried next to him.
I want to be buried next to him.
I want to be buried next to him. Where he is, I don't know, because my son can't go in there and look at it. No Kohanim can go there.
So it's very close to Kiev.
So when Bezrat Hashem, after London, we go to the Ukraine.
On the way.
Have you ever been to Ukraine?
Yeah, many times.
Oh, so you've been to Mezibish?
Of course.
You've been to Mezerich?
No.
Because they found the shul there.
Yeah, I just heard that they found it.
But the Maggid of Mezerich is not buried in Mezerich, he's buried in Anipoli.
Anipoli I've been. Yeah.
And Zipsosha.
Yeah. And the Maril.
So my son Baruch Hashem will take us. He has a car.
Zat Hashem, we should get to these wonderful days.
Yeah, you can go to the Ukraine from here to England.
You can go?
You can fly from here to the Ukraine.
And then to England and not need any...
But you can't, but there's no British Airways. There's only Wizz or Sleazy.
Is Wizz flying?
Wizz
is flying.
Wizz is flying from Ukraine to London. British Airways stopped all their flights to the Ukraine a year or two before the corona.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why, but they did.
Wizz is fine. I don't have a problem with Wizz.
Yeah, well, your thing. I'm fat.
Take two seats at the same price. It'll still be cheaper than British Airways.
Yeah.
But he won't get them together.
So you know the story.
I heard the story, yeah. I didn't...